When you are making a two-crust pie, it is basically the same recipe that you had, you just double it. So this is 2 cups of flour, 2/3 a cup of shortening, a teaspoon of salt that I've mixed together with enough water to make it come together. And then to make the rustic crust that I'm going to show you, you basically need to divide your dough into a smaller piece and a larger piece. This is usually about 1/3, and this is 2/3 of my dough. This will become the bottom of the crust. This will become the top crust. You can also, I'll show a pretty basic way to do it, but you can also do lattice or other kinds of crusts. I'll show you some pictures of those in a few minutes. Okay, here comes the part with the apples. In the slide I just showed you, I was taught by my grandmother to make apple pies to always have a variety of apples in your pie. We have a ton of different types of apples, and different apples have different qualities. So a Red Delicious is great for eating, but not good for baking. But a Fuji is great for baking and eating, and this is the go-to. If you only have one type of apple to make a pie with, Fuji's good. But if you saw, I put in Jana Gold, I put in Fuji, I put in Pink Ladies, whatever other kind you have. Just stick them in, and they don't have to be nice crispy apples. They can actually be a little bit on the soft side because they're going to be baking, and that will actually reclaim an apple that's too far gone to be eaten raw, but you can eat it this way. And let me show you the trick of how to peel them. First of all, I've been peeling other apples. That's why you see apples on this peeler. When you hold the apple peeler, hold it straight up and down. And what's going to happen is the apple is going to go at a 90-degree angle to the peeler, and the peeler stays still, and I'm actually twisting the apple. And what I'm doing is turning the apple into the peeler so that it just keeps going around and around, and it makes this nice spiral. And if you're doing well, sometimes you can get all the way around with just one thing. And I overlap, oops, there it broke, but anyway. And I'm just going to go ahead and keep pushing this around. Now, there is a phrase in America called easy as apple pie, and it's because pie is easy, and apples are the easiest of all the pies because honestly, all I have to do is add apples inside a crust, and it will thicken up and do what I want. I'm going to add a little bit of sugar to mine, but they are usually good enough you don't have to. Just a quick comment, the peeling of the apple is where most of the nutrients are in fiber. So although apples are good for us and we talk about them, and there really was a guy named Johnny Appleseed who went around planting apples in the United States, we tend to make it into our sort of our national pie. So, but if you're not going to eat the peels, please make sure that you compost them. The way I cut them now is I take them and I actually turn the apple upside down. It's now on a cutting board, and I'm going to take my knife, we've talked about this before, where I grip it here and I tuck my fingers underneath, and then I'm going to take the apple and I'm going to cut it to the, because I'm right-handed, I'm going to cut it to the right of the core. So here's the core and here's my knife. And then I take that and then I'm going to lay this flat so it's not going to roll on me. So I have a nice flat surface here. And then I'm going to do the same thing again where I go slightly to the right of the core. I flip my apple again. I'm going to go slightly to the right of core again and slight again so that I now have a square core. And I've gotten all my apple out without having to cut towards myself. Most of the time when people cut other ways, they tend to have it in a more dangerous way. And so this way it's nice and stable. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to cut into about somewhere between a 1/2 to 1 inch slices all the way across. And so I've got them all lined up, and as you can see, they're nice and stable. They just lay flat for me, and then come across here. And then I'm going to turn them sideways, and I'm going to cut in so they have nice cubes of 3/4 inch apples here, and this will be the apples that I'm going to put in my pie. You may have noticed there was some browning on the apples. Browning is actually a sign that the apple is full of sugar. It's the oxidation, the browning is what causes it to, the sugar coming out is what turns brown. If you see any pieces of peel like this, make sure that you take those off. Those will not dissolve, will not go away in your pie, and don't have the best mouthfeel. So if you see any small pieces of peel, make sure that you get those over. And then we're going to put those all into my bowl. Now I already have my other apples. You'll want somewhere between 4 large to 6 small apples, so that you have about, oop, I see a little bit of peel there. You want somewhere around 4 cups of apples for your pie. Then, to my 4 cups of apples that are nice and chunked up so they're nice and evenly shaped, I'm going to put in a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. You can use white sugar if you want. I prefer the brown sugar. Again, it was what my grandma taught me to use. You may have noticed I'm using the same bowl I use for my crust, and that is not a problem because everything that's in the pie is going in the crust. It's all going to be baking together. And then I'm going to put in about a teaspoon of cinnamon, and then I'm just going to put in a pinch of nutmeg. And then mix that all together, and then I'll show you the next step in a minute. Okay, now that I have the apples all mixed up, this is the crust. The bottom crust went into the pie pan. I'm going to push the apples into the pie pan, and it will sort of mound up, and that's actually a good thing because apples will cook down, and I want to have a nice generous pie. I don't want to have a pie where people are thinking, where's my apples? So I'm putting a nice mound of apples in this pie. And then once I have done that, to make this rustic crust, I am going to take the other piece of crust that I rolled out between plastic, the smaller piece. I'm going to remove the plastic, and I'm going to lay this on top of my pie. So it's now laying on, I still have my plastic attached, so that way I can sort of press it down over my pie and make sure that the apples are nice and secure. And then I'm going to pull that plastic off, and then I'm going to take the outside edge and just lay that back up over the top crust. This is called a rustic crust because it's not so fancy. It doesn't have the lattice work or the crimping that other pies have. But the advantage to this pie is that there's not as much crust around the outside. So if you have a family that doesn't like the crust and always leaves the crust behind on the plate, this is a way for them to eat the whole pie. And so, like I said, the bottom just came up and folded around the top. Then what I'm going to do is vent the crust. This is very important because if I don't vent the crust, I'll get big air bubbles in my pie, and then I'm going to have it'll have a big bubble inside with nothing inside. So you'll open up your pie and there'll be like this whole space between the top crust and your filling, and that's not fun. And then what I'm doing is you can make a design on the top, you can cut shapes out, you can use cookie cutters, do all kinds of things. And then you can do the same thing we did with our bread, where you can glaze or you can do a wash. I'm actually going to use a little bit of sugar, and if you wanted to, you could brush it with milk or butter first, but I like to just go ahead and sprinkle a little sugar over the top. It seems to make it have a little bit of a sparkle when it comes out and helps it to brown a little bit on the crust. I'm now going to stick this in the oven. I'm going to bake it at 400 degrees until the crust gets brown and the filling gets nice and bubbly, which tells me the apples are there. Apples have a natural pectin, which is a thickening agent, so they will, instead of it becoming apple juice, it's going to be a nice thick sauce on the inside. If I was using peaches or berries, I would have to add a thickener like cornstarch or flour. But with apple pie, that's what makes it so nice and easy, is I can just go ahead, stick them in there and bake it. And again, I'll let you see what it looks like at the end. So have fun making pie.